We all know Lorelai Gilmore as the quick-witted, energetic, coffee-addicted mum, but we don't talk often enough about what it was actually like to date her. In fact, I've noticed a lot of the discussion seems to be around Rory's boyfriends, but what about Lorelai's adult relationships? Especially because the show is from the perspective, narratively, of Lorelai, we don't actually know who was Team Lorelai or how they perceived her, because we only see the very one-sided view in terms of how Lorelai sees it. So today I wanted to dive into the main boyfriends of Lorelai, not so much the insignificant dates, but the main boyfriends, what they symbolized for her, and how they perceived her. I saw that Pensive Whiskers made the same version of the topic except for Rory Gilmore, which I just thought was a great idea for a title and for a video topic. I haven't actually watched the video, but I'm always looking for new ideas, and I was like, oh, this is exactly the sort of thing that I've been wanting to talk about on my channel as I continue this Gilmore Girls series. So make sure you check out the playlist in my description if you want to binge watch my other Gilmore Girls series, the rest of the videos, the deep dives, because there's a lot here to unpack. And if you want me to do the same video for Rory too, then let me know, because I'd be more than happy to do so. And no, it's not autumn, but I'm still going through my annual rewatch of this show because it's one of my favorites ever. It's funny because Lorelai is one big mystery. There was so much going underneath the surface with her. She's very complicated that it takes a while to figure her out. And honestly, that's what makes characters so interesting, is when they're a little bit mysterious. And that actually brings me to the sponsor of today's video, June's Journey. June's Journey is this gorgeous hidden object mystery game set in the 1920s, which, if you guys don't know, is actually my favorite era of all time in terms of aesthetics and clothing styles. It's full of drama, secrets, and plot twists, very much like Gilmore Girls. So I know this is the perfect thing for you guys as well, because I am absolutely in love with this game. And I've never been much of like a video game person or someone who does that, aside from a few, but this one I absolutely love. It's now one of my favorites, and I just find myself always wanting to play this when maybe I'm feeling in a bit of a creative mood or I want to be my own detective. You play as June Parker, who is a brilliant woman solving crimes without a badge, just her pure determination, intuition, and natural skills. What I really love is that this isn't just about a mystery, although it is. It also very much is about family secrets and relationships and drama, love, betrayal, all those interpersonal themes that really interest me. So if you're like me and you love these kinds of stories like Gilmore Girls, then this game, June's Journey, will be right up your alley. This game is just such a fun way to wind down whilst getting wrapped up in the story. I cannot recommend it enough. So thank you so much to June's Journey for sponsoring today's video. Please go and download it. It's for free on the App Store. You can download June's Journey for free. It's available on iOS, Android, and PC. Just click the link in my description or scan the QR code. So now let's just get back to Lorelai self-sabotaging all the good relationships she's ever had. Firstly, we have Max, the almost husband. Max entered the picture as a teacher at Chilton, in fact, Rory's teacher, which really complicated immediately his relationship with Lorelai. I don't think this was a great move on Lorelai's part and a bit self-sabotagey, considering how hard she worked to get Rory into Chilton. And I think dating a teacher is a little bit desperate. Like, I think it could definitely cause drama she can't even predict, so it's probably best to steer clear from those kinds of dynamics. It's going well at first, but Rory is a little bit uncomfortable with it, and also it's creating a lot of discomfort for Lorelai when she starts getting too close to Max. And from Max's perspective, Lorelai was like the dream woman. He was besotted with her. He thought she was amazing. He barely saw her flaws. And he really wanted that married, committed life, but he can't quite seem to lock her down. In fact, you see Lorelai starting to fall out of love with him when he's mentioning things about how he would be a father figure to Rory or how he would discipline her. Keep in mind, okay, that Lorelai has been a single mum throughout her whole life. She is not accustomed to a man coming in and being a primary decision maker or trying to run the show or, you know, insert his own opinion on how children should be raised, because in her opinion, she's been doing an amazing job the last few years and she really doesn't want any man's input because she has a system, she's done it by herself, she does it the way she likes it, and she thinks that she's done a good job and her system's working well, so she doesn't want anyone to come in and disrupt that. Max was fine, I have no problem with him, but he wasn't my favorite. Like, he was sweet, but I did think he was a bit clingy and a bit of a love bomber. When her beloved neighborhood cat died, she, I think, couldn't make it with plans with him, and he's all annoyed and not very understanding, and it just gave vibes that he was quite insecure and felt slightly entitled to her time. He took a lot of things personally, but Lorelai had her own issues too because she didn't want to allow him into her daughter Rory's life. She didn't really want to talk about how they would merge their lives, and she certainly didn't want to think about him staying over in case it would affect Rory. He does this whole elaborate proposal with daisies, and it was lovely, except that he wasn't actually there. The proposal took place over the phone, which is so weird. Maybe it's because he had a feeling that if he asked her to her face, that it would scare her off and she would run, so he literally did it through a call. In fact, I feel that he did it because he was jealous of Luke and it was an impulsive decision, not because he actually wanted to, and it all felt very rushed. They hadn't known each other for very long at all. Max did overstep, but I think he was coming from a good place. Even though he annoyed me sometimes, he genuinely cared and he wanted to make it work, but I do think he was focused too much on pinning Lorelai down in a sense and securing her rather than feeling out if she was actually interested or not. But I do think he definitely felt blindsided because there were points where he did ask if she was okay and she would lie and pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. He was respectful sometimes. He'd just be like, how do I handle this situation with Rory? Like, how do you want me to handle these kinds of situations with parenting? And Lorelai's very much like, you don't. Rory's my responsibility. And again, if you guys are going to get married and live your lives together, this isn't going to be a very sustainable system. You might need to accept that your parenting isn't perfect, or you may have differing parenting styles. Ironically, she was dead wrong, so wrong, about Rory being really mature and a golden child and not needing structure and discipline and parenting, because as we see later, Rory is a total mess and she was allowed to just run amok, date Dean, date Jess, date whoever she wanted when she was 16 and not even at uni. And Lorelai was way too chill about this. She wasn't behaving like the parent. She was behaving like a friend, and she just was not creating an environment where her daughter would respect her, because ultimately she would just give in and give Rory what she wanted. But it wasn't that bad. Like, they did have a nice relationship, but the really troubling part was when Lorelai just cut things off with him and she didn't communicate. She literally ran away. Instead of showing up for her wedding, she takes a road trip with Rory, which shows her tendency to cut and run when things get too serious. I felt terrible for Max. I think she did him so dirty and he deserved a proper explanation and not a disappearance. Lorelai confesses that she would love to be in love with him, which definitely poses the question, can we truly choose and control who we love? I mean, yes, to a certain extent you can manage your own feelings and you can be logical and you can think things through, but I think after a certain point, you know, if you're not really like feeling it, you're just not feeling it anymore. You suddenly can't force a feeling.
Ah, I love when men say that to me.
Her later marriage to Christopher carries the same sense of not being authentic and being something forced, where she's pretending it's fine, but she's not really happy with it. And all in all, I think Max was pretty blindsided by this. It also doesn't help that at her bachelorette party, she claims she's just drunk, but it's deeper than that. She calls Christopher her ex. So she never really wanted to get married to Max because she was always waiting for Christopher to come through. And this actually leads me to the next man, which is Christopher, the baby daddy, because this is, I believe, Lorelai's most complicated and possibly most divisive relationship. People either seem to love Christopher and say, oh, he grew up so much, or they just hate him. And I have a very complicated relationship with it myself, because I believe that the problem with Lorelai's relationship with Christopher is there were too many voices and too many interferences from her parents from a young age, kind of controlling the both of them, which made it very hard for them to just pursue the relationship authentically. But I will say that Lorelai was in a long-term relationship with Christopher as a child, like in my opinion as a child, but she was like 16, 17, they were dating and she got pregnant. Wasn't intentional, but it put them in a situation where everyone wanted them to get married, and Lorelai was a child. That wasn't what she wanted. She didn't want a marriage, and she would much rather raise a child on her own than ever be forced into a marriage that she didn't want, especially because her parents were always kissing Christopher's ass and just being so annoying. She didn't want to almost say yes to them ever. She was rebellious. She didn't want to pick the guy they wanted her to be with. She attempted to allow Christopher to be a parent, but this offer was refused unless she would marry him, and Lorelai didn't want that. And to be fair, he was only a teenager too, okay? So he also was clueless about what to do and equally traumatized about this situation. But Lorelai does believe that she can handle it by herself, and she cuts off all contact from her parents. This is definitely an example of when you have parents that fundamentally are always jumping down your throat, that attack you, that don't parent you, that aren't there for you, that never cut you any slack and are just so cold. It creates a very rebellious child when you have controlling parents like that. And that's what Lorelai wanted to do. She wanted to rebel because she felt misunderstood. And I think Christopher was hurt by this because they were in a relationship before that, but it was just so complicated. But my biggest issue with Christopher is that, like many of her boyfriends, including Max and Jason, is that they have actual boundary issues and they don't really know when to leave Lorelai alone or how to truly make her happy and meet her emotional needs. And this is a problem repeatedly with these guys. Christopher really cared about Lorelai, but I noticed a lot of their interactions are very much based on hooking up and sex. And what's missing is him being that consistent figure in her life that she needs, and often missing key moments when he really needed to be there. And the problem is that later on, around season 6, once he's actually starting to get his shit together, he inherited a bunch of money from his grandfather, he becomes rich. At that point, he's trying to be generous with her. He wants to give to her financially to repay her for all this pain he's caused. He's like, what can I buy you? The problem is at that point, Lorelai's past it and she doesn't really want his money. And it's almost like once he's starting to become the guy that she needs, it's like way too late, because it took Christopher a very long time to grow up. His first appearance is in season 1 and he arrives unexpectedly on his motorcycle, disrupting Lorelai and Rory's routine. And this is basically always what Christopher does. He cools at the worst and most inconvenient time. His parents still blame Lorelai for ruining his life and his chances of going to college, even though he wasn't raising a baby on his own and his life is his responsibility. Lorelai is the scapegoat, so she gets blamed for everything. It's the way it always is with Lorelai. He meets her, they talk, they have this brief physical reconnection, if you get what I'm saying, and it's followed by morning after regret. And this, again, with the boundary thing, he always comes in at the worst time. They hook up and he leaves again, or he just is disappointing in some way. Like they hook up when she's in a really emotional state or she's crying, like in season 6, and she's not really in a place to be hooking up with him, and that's when it happens. And he almost takes advantage of her when she's vulnerable. Like she could be crying after a terrible argument with her father and drinking tequila, and that's when he makes a move. It's not a good time. And this is what worries me a lot, makes me concerned that maybe this is what he was doing when they were teenagers. Like, did she have a fight with her parents and get mad and get drunk and then they had sex and that's how she got pregnant? Like, I know that's a dark way to look at it, but this seems to be the pattern with them. Rory's hopes for a perfect family reunion are cut short when he leaves again. He and Lorelai are on good terms in a sense, like they don't hate each other, but he was never there. He missed it. He missed it in the most important parts when Rory was growing up, he ultimately abandoned his child. And regardless of if he and Rory were, you know, seeing each other all the time, he could have seen her way more often than he did. He never saw her at all. He never calls. And I get that he was hurt by what happened between him and Lorelai, but he was not responsible in the slightest. I don't care if Lorelai wanted to do it herself or she managed well. He should have tried harder. It was his child and he was completely uninvolved for the first 16 years of her life. In season 1, episode 10, when Lorelai's father Richard has a health scare, Richard doesn't come to help. It's actually Luke who steps in and comes to offer support as always. Then we have the season 2 arc where again he returns claiming to have his life together, and he attends Rory's debutante ball, I guess hoping he'll grow closer with her because he realizes he's missed out on so much, and he stays at their house. But things start getting complicated because again, like, he and Lorelai are, you know, flirting. He has a girlfriend at the time, but Lorelai thinks that maybe he's gonna just leave his girlfriend and be with her because he seems to be so, like, in love with her, you know what I mean, and so committed to be there for her and Rory, and they sleep together. And she makes some comment about, oh, so are you gonna move out? Because she thinks he's gonna move out and, you know, leave Sherry. And, you know, he seems to be so all in with Lorelai. He's telling Rory that things are going to be different now and that, you know, they're going to be a family again, effectively. And obviously they've got a wedding to go to, so they're all very much prepared for that. Lorelai is so just happy and blissful, and she excitedly tells her mother, you're going to be seeing a lot more of Christopher, you know, he's going to be here all the time, because she thinks this is finally it, and Christopher's become the man he was supposed to be after 16 years of not being there. And then in the season 2 finale, it all falls apart. Actually, there's this really iconic final shot of Rory and Lorelai holding their bouquets. They can't speak to each other because they need to pretend to be happy because it's a wedding, but they both have their own drama going on. Rory is feeling ashamed because for the first time she's cheated on her boyfriend Dean with Jess, so she's feeling guilty because she is just a massive fuck up. Like, this is the start of the kind of person that she is becoming, which is someone who is focused on her relationships, her romantic relationships at far too young an age, where she should be focusing on her self-development. And Lorelai is just devastated because 2 minutes earlier, Christopher's left and he said, sorry, I need to go because Sherry's just called me, my girlfriend, she's told me that she's pregnant. And, you know, I can't leave her. I can't be a mess up. I need to stand by her. So he's basically hooked up with Lorelai and then gone back to his girlfriend. He's basically going back to father a child when he couldn't even father his own child correctly. And I know that Gigi's going to become his child, but it's just so hurtful when you leave to start a family, but you were never there for your original family either. And the interesting thing is that I don't think he's doing Gigi any favors by pretending to be in love with Sherry and marrying her, which is what he intends to do. Marrying someone you don't want to marry for the sake of a child is a terrible example to set to that child and a terrible way to bring them into the world. It's inauthentic, it's not honest, and most importantly, it's hurting Rory because he's abandoned her yet again with no warning after a bunch of false promises. This show is my Roman Empire because the season 1 finale ended with them all being excited over their respective partners, and the season 2 finale ends with everything going so terribly wrong. And it's so interesting how Gilmore Girls creates the characters starting off in a pretty good place and then gradually, like, we see them disintegrate more and more, and things get more and more complicated the more Rory grows up. He doesn't tell Sherry anything, like the fact that he cheated on her with Lorelai in that weekend is completely dishonest. Then he has pretty minimal presence as he builds a life with Sherry, and then the birth of Gigi, his daughter, and he invites Rory to visit, but, you know, he's pretty distant from them. But because Lorelai is respectful, she obviously shows up for the birth to check everything's okay, and he's just ranting about what an amazing experience it was, how beautiful it was to be there for the birth, and how you have to be there. And it's so insensitive to the fact that Lorelai gave birth by herself and raised a child by herself when Christopher wasn't there, and now he's marveling and how great it is to be a dad. And I can imagine that Lorelai is so salty because he was never there for her when she needed him. And this highlighted to me how inherently shitty Christopher is, because he is a deeply childish and irresponsible person who just cannot even consider the perspective of others. He returns later during Lorelai's relationship with Luke, and Emily orchestrates his appearance at the vow renewal, and he does this whole "we're meant to be, we were always meant to be" speech to Lorelai, which causes the Luke-Lorelai breakup, and he was egged on by Emily to do this, given false hope that Lorelai maybe wanted him. And he has a pattern of appearing when Lorelai is basically stable with someone else, and we see that he's becoming a more responsible parent with his single parenthood, because around season 5, season 6, Sherry's abandoned him and Gigi to go to Paris. So very ironically, he gets a taste of his own medicine, and he's now a single dad raising a child, and Lorelai feels a certain responsibility to help him or check on him, because it's difficult, and he's like, no, like, I don't know how you did this, you're like Superwoman or something. We do see his growth. He's definitely becoming a much more likable character. And then Lorelai gives Luke this whole ultimatum of marry me or else kind of thing. It doesn't go that well, and so she, you know, goes back to Christopher like she always does to be consoled because she's a mess, and as always he takes advantage of her. In season 7 we see his spontaneous marriage in Paris to Lorelai following the Lorelai-Luke breakup. By the way, I don't take anything around season 7 as canon or endgame. Like, even a lot of things in season 6 I dismiss. I think the writing started to get a bit funny, and we started to see the dumbing down of various characters like Luke and Dean, so don't take everything I say here with a grain of salt. I know everyone gets so mad at Luke for the April storyline for lying about having a child, and everyone gets so mad that Lorelai would be so disrespectful to impulsively marry Christopher in season 7, and they get so angry about it. But to me, I feel like this was a sign that the show was losing its marbles a little bit, and I don't really take it that seriously, because to me it seems a little bit over the top, but just keep that in mind. But yes, they get married, and even though the timing does align for them, they still can't make it work. And Lorelai still can't cut Luke out from her life, so it's just complicating things with Christopher. And ultimately, it suggests that Christopher was Lorelai's first love and this kind of emotional crutch that she goes back to every time, but maybe not something that's meant to be in her life forever. I've noticed that Christopher is a very passive kind of character. Like, he does whatever Emily tells him. He only goes back to try and get Lorelai into his life again when Emily eggs him on to do it. But maybe this is the kind of guy that Lorelai likes, because she likes to do things her way. She's not great at compromising. So maybe she likes that he's a somewhat passive character. I mean, he often goes to her for help. He asks for help in how to be a single dad at the very start, and he asks her, when he's being set up in this date he doesn't want to be on by Emily, he's like to Lorelai, what do I do? Like, help me, get me out of this. And so Lorelai saves him and gets him out of it, you know? He really doesn't take charge a lot of the time. Maybe in a way this is why it played out the way it did, because Christopher wasn't going to co-parent Rory ever, so Lorelai can make the decisions, and she doesn't need someone questioning her parenting or annoying her or nagging her. And the problem is that if she'd split custody with him and Rory was spending half the week, let's say, living with Christopher's from a rich family. He's from the world that Lorelai has tried so hard to escape. So if he was raising Rory half the time, then that would keep Lorelai in a way in contact with that world that she tried so hard to escape from. She didn't want that whole rich, fabulous, elitist lifestyle. She wanted Rory to reject it too, because she's so traumatized that she can't see that it's really her relationship with her parents that's the problem. It's not really the problem of that world specifically. It's just, but you know, she just would rather reject it as a whole because it reminds her of her past. And that is, by the way, why she gets so furious and hates Logan for no reason when Rory starts dating Logan, because it's reintroducing Rory to that world and kind of pulling them back into it again. But you know, that's the way it is. You can't always escape your past. And I think if Lorelai truly wanted to cut off and escape her past, she wouldn't have entertained Christopher at all like she did it multiple times throughout the show. In a way, people often comment on this spark that always seems to exist between Christopher and Lorelai throughout the show, and that's what they comment on to say, oh, these two are perfect together, which I think is really interesting, because the only reason why they're giving each other the flirty eyes and they're always teasing each other and being playful is because that's the dynamic when they were kids. They go into this very childlike energy around each other, but you never actually see them sharing a life or doing the mundane stuff or him helping her through difficult times, because they were never there to help each other through difficult times. He missed all of that, and he was only there for the fun stuff or to hook up with her when he felt like it. And I think because they didn't have to do those parenting interactions, it actually preserved a lot of this fun and banter and attraction between them that a lot of people praise. Because let's be real, marriage can be tough. Raising kids can be tough. You need to consult each other on decisions, and yeah, like, it's so much more fun when you don't need to stress about your different parenting styles, because one wants a private school, one wants a public school, one's into strict discipline, one's into letting the kid do whatever they want. That's the kind of thing that causes, you know, problems in a relationship. But this made it easier because she didn't need to consult him with big decisions involving the kids. And also, let's keep in mind, okay, in a lot of ways, because Lorelai was also co-creating this dynamic with him, this was the way it was between them. In a way, maybe that's what Lorelai was used to, because she had an absent father growing up. Richard never spent time with her unless it's to criticize. He never really engages with her. He's always distant. He doesn't give her a hug when he sees her. You know, he just sort of wanders around, and you know, this is a dynamic at play. Emily will bulldoze like Lorelai, and Richard would just sit back and let her do it and just facilitate everything. So this is the kind of useless father figure, useless really, that Lorelai grew up with. So it makes sense that maybe she would be interested in a man like Christopher. I know some people detest Christopher. I don't hate him, okay? I have no problem with Christopher. I actually really grow to like him once he develops as a person and becomes a single dad. And this maturation took a long time. So I'm never gonna sit here and say, I hate Christopher. I don't even think he's a bad guy. I just think that he brought Lorelai a lot of pain. Her opinion of him as an individual and her relationship with him was always different to how she wanted Rory to think of him, because even if she hated Christopher and she had the biggest fight, Lorelai still wanted Rory and Christopher to somewhat be on like okay terms, and she wanted Rory to have somewhat good memories of her father because she didn't want to scare her. So she would never explicitly badmouth him, but she would just say things to Rory like, you know what, you've done nothing wrong, don't take it personally, his behavior's his problem, or he'll come round, don't worry, and she would sort of leave them to it. As Rory got older and she went to uni, I noticed that Lorelai started being a bit more open about how Christopher had disappointed her, but it took a while for her to do so. And she didn't want Rory thinking that Christopher was abandoning them to go off and raise Gigi in his new family. So that's why she tries to really preserve Rory's sense of self-worth and tell her not to take it personally. To be honest, because a lot of people give Lorelai shit for being a single mom, I think she just sensed that Christopher was too young, and even at a young age herself, she just knew that he would not have been able to handle it, and she knew that the best thing to do was to stay away from him and wait until he was old enough to actually grow up and behave like a responsible adult. And honestly, I don't blame her. All she was focused on throughout Rory's childhood was protecting Rory from the inevitable Chris disappointment, because that's what he was a disappointment. Now, I really need to talk about Christopher's behavior at the Val renewal, because basically Emily came to him like the night before and said, go get Lorelai back or you'll never get a chance again. So he does it, right? But I think it was absolutely unacceptable, because first of all, he starts confessing his feelings for Lorelai, even though he knows Lorelai is in a happy relationship with Luke at the time and he doesn't care. But then he comes into the room and he sees his daughter Rory kissing Logan. And it's meant to this whole deal, which first of all, I feel like that's so embarrassing. Like, I know they were being silly, but also like, they're in love. Like, I don't know, leave them to it. Like, to me, they were just in love, and I feel like, give them 15 minutes, give them 20 minutes. Like, I don't know, no need to be so mad. But anyway, he starts being so angry. He's like, what are you doing with my daughter? Get your hands off my daughter. And he tries to like physically like assault him. And then Luke's like, stay away. And it's like, Oh my God, the toxic masculinity on show right now from both of you boys. Like literally back off. Lorelai was doing a fine job. She didn't need both of them yelling at poor Logan, who's just like this 22-year-old boy. Like, what's going on? And then he's provoking Luke and like saying, Lorelai, you and me, we're meant to be and you know it. Oh my gosh, so embarrassing. So embarrassing. I don't even think Luke was bothered at Lorelai specifically about this, but it was just the build up, the whole night going so terribly wrong and Christopher just negging him like this. He has this sense of ownership that he can take Lorelai when he wants. He can tell Rory who to kiss and who not to kiss and pull the dad card even though he was never her dad. And what's interesting is Christopher also has this, from his perspective, this delusion that he and Lorelai somehow belong together, and it's this inevitable thing that will somehow fall into his lap even though he's never actively done anything to prove to her that he's the one. And he's saying, I'm Rory's father, stay away from her. And Luke's like, I'm dating Lorelai. And he's like, no, like you're just whatever. And Luke was like, I'm sorry, who are you? Where were you when she was 5 and she got sick, when she got scarlet fever, when she got, you know, chicken pox, when she went her first day of school? Where were you for all those milestones? I feel like Luke ate with that because honestly, Luke was always more of a father to Rory than Christopher ever was. But then Christopher tries to take ownership of being a dad, but he just wasn't a dad. And that's the thing too, is he does these outbursts a lot. Like, remember I told you about season 2 when he told Lorelai that his girlfriend Sherry's pregnant? Well, obviously after that happens, Lorelai realizes she can no longer be with Christopher because he's literally going to go and have a family with someone else. So she doesn't answer his 46 calls and she's so devastated because she, for once, allowed herself to give into the hope that maybe this time will be different. He let her down again. And then in season 3, episode 1, because she's not speaking to him, Chris actually comes into the house, barges in on Friday night dinner, annoyed that Lorelai isn't answering his calls, and he actually is like, she's saying, please leave, not in my house, please leave, not my mother's house. He's like, I can do what I want. What else am I supposed to do? You don't answer my calls, so I'm gonna come here and talk to you, and I'm not leaving, like a loony, right? And she's like, babe, you're going off with another woman. Are you still gonna marry Sherry and have a child? He's like, yeah. She's like, then we've got a problem. And he's like, oh, but I don't want it to be this way. She's like, but it is this way. This is the way it is. He's like, oh, but I didn't want it to be this way. I'm like, babe, then use protection. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. And then he says to her, like, it's not right, you're cutting me out, you're not talking to me, and Rory isn't talking to me. And then he says, Rory needs her father, it's not right, and you know it. Says the man who wasn't there for like 17 years, right? And then he's so delulu, he's convinced himself that somehow Lorelai has turned Rory against him with like master manipulation somehow. And that somehow like Lorelai has brainwashed Rory into not answering his calls, which isn't the case, by the way. Rory just hates him. And then Rory's like pissed at him, so she goes off and he tries to barge after Rory, even though she's explicitly said, like, don't follow me, leave me alone. And they have to ask him over and over to please leave, and he's not leaving. And then Rory shares before she runs away that she's so hurt that he gave her all these false promises about how they'd be a family again, and then he dumps her 10 minutes later at Suki's wedding. And the funny thing is, while he's there, you know, ranting at Lorelai as he always does, he is not appreciating that she's still so heartbroken over him and this fantasy of him that he can never fulfill. He proposed to Sherry, okay? No one forced him into it. No one forced him to marry her. He was the one who cheated on Sherry with Lorelai again. No one forced him to do it. And what made it worse is that Emily and Richard were always taking Christopher's side and trying to matchmake him and Lorelai, and then shitting all over Lorelai when it didn't work out with Christopher. When things don't work out with Christopher because he's got Sherry pregnant, the reaction from Emily and Richard is absolutely disgusting. They're like jumping down Lorelai's throat, assuming it's her fault. And then she eventually says, oh, actually, like, Christopher got another woman pregnant. And they're like, oh, okay. And they still find a way to blame her. It's actually insane. So that's the thing. Christopher's never taught to take responsibility because all the blame goes on to Lorelai. And he comes from a rich family. He inherits a lot of money. So he was always very privileged and he was never taught to actually take responsibility for anything. And whenever he gets his life together, you're so excited and you realize he's done it for another woman like Sherry, and it's not actually for them because he could never do it for them. Christopher really viewed Lorelai through this nostalgic lens as this beautiful girl that he fell in love with when he was just a teenager, and he seemed to cherish a really idealized version of their relationship that was frozen in time, and he was always referring to her by, you know, his childhood nickname for her. And he cannot stay away from her, but also Lorelai cannot stay away from him. I mean, she calls him whenever she has a problem, whenever she's fought with Luke. When she breaks up with Luke, the first thing she does is come to Christopher and hook up with him. And honestly, I hate to say this because obviously everyone loves Luke and Luke's been there for such a long time, but I always felt that Lorelai was way more attached in a very deep way to Christopher than she was to Luke or any other guy, because she always seemed to just be waiting for that one day when Christopher would grow into his potential in a sense and then like come back home to her. And you see this shame she has from talking to Christopher whenever she does, or whenever he tries to send her a voicemail, she tries to hide it from Luke because she kind of knows that she's doing the wrong thing. Like there's still this attraction there that is always consistent for her. He just lives rent-free in her mind, you know what I mean? And even in season 5, episode 9, she's literally dating Luke, and she calls Christopher to ask him for lunch, and she doesn't tell Luke about it. She lies. And maybe like that's because a part of her is impressed that Christopher is becoming a single dad, and she just wants to like spend time with him, and she's just impressed by how he's growing up and pulling his life together. And it just made me feel like she also, in the back of her mind, had this belief that somehow they were like meant to be together under different circumstances. But what's interesting is somehow their season 7 relationship failed. Even when they finally get this perfect opportunity and they're both single, it still doesn't work. It still doesn't work. So maybe this was only ever going to be some sort of wounded, like karmic kind of relationship, based on a lot of like almost like this, not codependency, but just like this wounding and this anxious attachment and this inability to let each other go. But maybe that's all it ever was, you know. So now let's get into the next character, which is Luke, the best friend turned lover. One of my favorite tropes. Luke is Lorelai's best friend. We actually meet him in the very first scene of the show, which basically highlights that they're meant to be. We literally, in the opening shot, see her walking through Stars Hollow, the sign that points to the name of the town, and going straight into Luke's diner, where they have an interaction and he gets her coffee and he's being like fake mad, but he's not actually mad. So this is basically the idea of like, what if the person that's right for you has been there staring you in the face the whole time and you never realized, that kind of idea. And that's the thing is, if I'm describing Christopher as like the flaky, sporadic one that's like sort of getting his shit together, and Luke is the definition of stability. Like he is consistent, he is always there, he always shows up, he's always on time. And his diner has become the place that Lorelai and Rory like to frequent. And actually it's one of the reasons why Lorelai didn't want to date him initially, is because it's their favorite place to go and eat. So if it didn't work out, they would just lose out on the best diner in town. But initially, like, they're really just friends. Like they just talk probably every day for maybe 15 minutes when she goes in to get coffee. It's very much a friendship though, but like, one of the consistent patterns is that Luke is a really good friend, and Lorelai always accepts Luke's constant help without really acknowledging the depth of feeling behind it, and that he's very much doing it because, you know, he wants her, not just because he's her friend. And she's very like in denial about this whilst enjoying the attention, but also she's not ready for anything serious, but she still wants to benefit from having him in her life in a way that I consider quite self-indulgent, to be honest. But for years, like, he's down bad. This man is a simp, and in the best way possible, because who doesn't want a simp? Like, what's more attractive than like actually being devoted to someone you love and showing your interest. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. But for years, he repairs her house, he provides food during a crisis, he builds her a freaking ice skating rink, he offers her emotional support, all while she just refers to him as that diner guy, just Luke, or a friend, and she definitely takes him for granted. There's so many times in season 1 she just goes in to grab a burger and orders and doesn't even acknowledge him because she just doesn't really care. But what's striking is Luke sees Lorelai not just as an individual, but as kind of a package deal with Rory, and so he makes sure to really include Rory in everything and be like a father figure to Rory and check in on her, because he does understand better than anyone that Lorelai is a single mum. So for her to love him, he has to love her daughter, and that's what makes Lorelai truly fall in love with Luke. And it's really beautiful is when she realizes that he just unconditionally loves Rory and supports her. He even gets Rory a birthday cake and candles on her birthday in like season 1. Like, he is genuinely like an amazing guy. He has this sort of gruff persona, pretending he's mean and grumpy all the time, but underneath he's like a big softie. He finds out that Lorelai's marrying another man, and he literally he builds her one of those archway things for her to stand under. Even though he's upset she's going to marry someone else, he still wants to show his support for her because he just wants to see her happy. He says as much. Anytime she had a termite problem, she needed something fixing, he would come over. And not just through actions or building her stuff, but he was financially generous. He lent her like a 30k loan for something. Then he built her a house, and she was ungrateful and didn't like that house, so he fixed it without complaint rather than trying to convince her to like it. He's always showing, he struggles to articulate his emotions, and he shows it through his actions and things he does for her. And trust me, when you've been married for like 30 years, the most attractive thing that someone can do for you is that you come home and you see like the bed is made, the dishes are done, you know, fresh flowers in the vase, clothes are washed. Like, it's not just about them saying nice things to you all the time. It actually makes you feel so good when someone genuinely like knows how to take care of you. And Luke is really good at that. And he also makes amazing food and coffee, which for Lorelai as a coffee addict is perfect, but also he genuinely cares about her health. He genuinely cares. Like, when she's eating really badly or having too much coffee, he's like, that's not great for your health. Like, not in an annoying, like naggy way, but he just genuinely is a health freak, and he wants her to do better for herself. And I just really love Luke because Lorelai is so intense and talkative and intense, all over the place, way too much sometimes. And because Luke is so grounded and comfortable within himself, I think they really balance each other out. And keep in mind, okay, from Luke's perspective, Lorelai is like this goddess, okay? Emily said that he looked at her like Lorelai was about to give him a strip dance. Like, that's literally how he sees her. He's just like in awe. He thinks she's beautiful. And season 1 was their best season because you get so many little moments of them just like flirting and looking into each other's eyes, where you see that they have this like undeniable attraction. And Lorelai knows he's cute, okay? She knows he's cute. She even mentions it a few times, but she just doesn't want to like cross that line with him. And that's the thing. Luke is a fun man. He's a fun man. He's a real cutie with that baseball cap turned backwards. And Lorelai knows he's cute, especially like when he dresses up nice for an event. She really admires him. And you know, a lot of people say, oh, Lorelai never did anything for him, like she never cleaned his house. But that's the thing, relationships should never be transactional. It shouldn't be about, oh well, you did this for me, so I have to do this for you. If what makes Luke feel good is taking care of his woman, making her things, providing things for her, like, who's to say he shouldn't do that? If he wants to do that, by all means, Luke, go ahead. If he wants to just treat her like the goddess she is and bring value to her life, I'm all here for it, okay? I don't think Lorelai's obligated to like do the same in return. If this is what makes him happy and it just makes him feel good to like make her happy, then I think it's perfect. But the interesting thing is, I always had the idea that Luke wanted Lorelai way more than Lorelai wanted him in season 1. He very much seems like the pursuer, and she's sort of the avoidant who pretends she hasn't noticed and acts dumb. And the fact that he literally and physically, not just metaphorically, serves her daily, like he brings her coffee and he waits on her, is so symbolic to me because, you know, he was fixing things for her, he bought her a basket, and he just found ways to like provide for her just through gestures. He even invests in her inn when she opens her own inn, the Dragonfly, whatever it's called. He puts money towards it. Like, he just gives everything that he has for that. And so if the show is from his perspective, he would probably perceive Lorelai as like this goddess dream woman, this manic pixie dream girl who is just so like mysterious and like, you know, eccentric and stuff, and like brings him out of his shell. And so any of her flaws, sometimes he doesn't even see them that clearly, right? Because he really idolizes her and he puts her on a pedestal. And you see this because he thinks he's not good enough for her, because he comes from a poor family, he doesn't come from money. And this insecurity is something he and Jess bond over, being like the underdog. But that's the thing I think Luke's really missing, is that Lorelai rejected that whole life anyway. I think she's got an issue with money in a way. She doesn't really want it. Like when Christopher offers her money around season 5 or 6, she's like, no, I don't want it. I don't want anything from you. She really doesn't want it, like only when it's absolutely crucial. But it took her a while to be in a place to be ready for Luke. So he has to watch. She dates Max, she dates Jason, Christopher, and Luke just has to stand by and kind of wait patiently for Lorelai to notice him. The self-help tape storyline really revealed a lot about Luke's mind, because he wanted to listen to advice about how to express your feelings and have a relationship, because he bottles up so much. He doesn't really know how to express his feelings or really ask her out and seduce her, and he genuinely wants advice. And I found that really sweet because it shows he's somewhat interested in bettering himself and like self-development. And there are countless times, too many to count, I'm not even joking, where he does something nice for her when she's in a bad mood. He's the first to congratulate her on a success. He really is her best friend. But the first time we see proper tension between them is in season 2 with the introduction of Jess, because he's this troublesome nephew that Luke has to take care of. And there's an accident where Jess crashes the car with Rory in it, and Lorelai's furious and projects all her anger onto Luke as if he raised this douchebag of a nephew. And Luke says, what about Jess? Is he hurt? And Lorelai says, no, Luke, Jess did the hurting. That little punk nephew of yours almost killed my kid tonight. So again, she's completely putting Rory on a pedestal, making out that Rory is the angel child, as if Rory didn't willingly get into that car. But she's very like unreasonable and childish, and you know, she's had this weird resentment bubbling up towards Jess for months, and now she's taking it out on Luke. But it's not his fault that his nephew's a little shit, you know. And it's very like explosive, but also it's inconsiderate, because he should be worried about his nephew's safety, not just Lorelai's and not just Rory's. And she wants it to be about her all the time. She puts all the blame on Luke for taking Jess in, saying that his obligation isn't to his family but to her and Rory and all of Stars Hollow. Basically, Lorelai thinks that the Gilmores are the center of the universe, and I just don't think this was fair. It's definitely one of the worst fights they've ever had in the show. And you know, she always has this anger towards Jess that really comes out at a few times and causes problems between them. When she watches Rory's wrecked car get towed, her first instinct is to get her phone and call Christopher. I thought it was interesting because rather than digging his heels in, Luke actually punished Jess for being a douchebag, which shows that he's a good guy and he does stand by them. So the problem with Luke and Lorelai is that their relationship was great and really sexy until they actually started getting serious, and then it all went downhill. But Luke is actually like her boyfriend now, so he goes to the Friday night dinner for her to introduce him to her parents, and it just goes down so badly because they never liked him. Like Emily thinks of him as like the Iceman, and they worry about his career prospects, his ability to provide for Lorelai and a family. They're annoyed that he has an individual in and not just a chain of them that to open globally. They're confused when he doesn't want to take up Rich's business offer to expand globally because he's a down-to-earth guy and isn't superficial like they all are. And this is a moment where you can really see that Luke is considering if he should cut and run, because Lorelai was fine in the fantasy version of it, but when he actually started getting to know her and dating her, he realized how complicated it was to be judged so harshly by her entire family that he now has to deal with and interact with. And in times of their first big breakup, that was at the vow renewal when Christopher arrived and ruined it and started spewing out all this stuff about how he and Lorelai were meant to be together. And I totally understand why Luke wanted a bit of space from Lorelai after this and to not speak to her for a while. Because imagine like you've been invited to this event, you're already a bit nervous about going, right? Because it's all these high society people there. And then your girlfriend's ex, baby daddy, shows up and starts making a whole drama about how the two of them are like destined to be together. And then you find out that your potential future mother-in-law has orchestrated it because she believes that Christopher's a better match for your girlfriend than you are. Like, really think about how that would make you feel. You'd feel totally ganged up on. And then he finds out that Lorelai's been hanging out with Christopher when he didn't even know about it, like behind his back. She only came clean as well because she was about to get caught. No wonder he was upset. He needed some space. It was just too much information to get all at once, and it was probably very shocking. And he didn't run. He just wanted time and space to process what an awful night it had been, and that was a request that Lorelai simply couldn't respect, and it just made her freak out and think that she would lose him altogether, and she totally just like lost her shit over this. Lorelai is handling the situation so immaturely, chasing after him to talk about it when he's not ready to talk about it, and Lorelai she just couldn't handle the thought of him rejecting her. Anyway, later in the show when they get back together, they start dating. They're super, super cute. I love them as a couple, genuinely, but then like they get engaged, and this is what pissed me off because she didn't tell anyone when her and Luke got engaged around season 6, episode 2. This one made me so angry that I had to give it its own section, because basically at this point in the series, Lorelai and Rory are in the midst of their biggest fight ever. They're not talking because what Lorelai loves to do is just cut people off and cut and run when they piss her off rather than communicating. So she's not really speaking to she's not speaking to Emily or Rory. She's just cut off everyone. And this is what happens when she doesn't get her way. But considering it's such a big milestone, it shocked me that Lorelai wouldn't reach out to them to tell them such big news, especially because she's done this in the past where she doesn't share an engagement or something special happening. And to me, it felt like because she was in a bad place and she was feeling lonely and missing her daughter, that was why she asked Luke if they wanted to get married, and not because she actually wanted to marry him in that moment. And, you know, when they eventually get back together, Lorelai just goes straight back to hiding things again. Her communication is terrible. She's just anything related to Christopher, she's not being open about it. And, you know, Luke then finds out about it, and like, it's just so weird, like having lunch with him and not mentioning it. Later on in the show, you know, he tries calling her, and she was kind of trying to hide the phone so he wouldn't hear the voicemail. Luke says, no more secrets, okay? And that's when we have their whole like relationship. Well, at one point she there's another point where she cheats on him, doesn't she, to be with Christopher. Yeah, the minute things fall apart with Luke, she gives him an ultimatum like, marry me or else. He doesn't want it. She then runs off to like sleep with Christopher. I can't imagine how badly that would have hurt Luke. I think she just genuinely thought her and Luke were done for good and it would never happen again, so she was just hurt. But still, like, that would have really bothered Luke, because he knows that no matter what he does, he can't fully get Christopher out of their lives, because it is technically Rory's dad. But a lot of people get really angry at Luke around season 6, 7 because of the whole April thing, because they didn't like the hypocrisy of him saying to Lorelai, no more secrets, okay? And then lying when he finds out he has a daughter. But in my defense, this was just poor writing. In my defense of him, I mean, it was just lazy writing. And basically he finds out he has a daughter and he doesn't know how to tell Lorelai, so he leaves it for like, I think around 2 months or 2 weeks or something like that. Like, he just really delays telling her. Yeah, maybe 2 months. And to be honest, I understood, because he sees her as someone that deserves better than him, and he genuinely like got a shock, and he didn't know how to share it. But after a while of him not sharing it, to me it just felt like poor writing and the show fabricating drama, because this did seem a little bit out of character for Luke to do something so dramatic, especially because they're best friends and they do tell each other a lot. I do think that he was a better man because he actually understood Lorelai's needs, and he was present and he was there for her, and he genuinely cared about her. And he actually wanted to see her happy. He told her that explicitly. No one else did. Her parents wanted her to live the life that they planned out for her and be this perfect robot child. And if she didn't, they would like disinherit her. And Christopher wanted Lorelai to like save him or something and like baby him. And Luke was the only one who actually tried to make Lorelai's life better and happier. The only thing that bothers me about Luke is like his anger management issues, like him randomly assaulting customers and kicking them out of the store. It was hilarious at first, then it started getting a bit weird, like him violently assaulting Jess and Dean, who are 2 teenagers. Anyone that like hurts Rory, he just has to go and assert his toxic masculinity and like attack people. Sometimes they take it too far and it just seems like it's more than just a gruff exterior, but it's just him being like an asshole basically. But I still love Luke. He has his flaws, but I really think that you could see that he really cared about Lorelai, and he was a man who knew what he wanted, and I love that. But the next character is Jason, who was one of Lorelai's short-term boyfriends. I'm not gonna go too much into Jason just because I found him really annoying, like his voice was annoying me, but he pushed a lot to ask her out, and he burst onto the scene in season 4 as Richard Gilmore's new business partner. And he had history with the Gilmores, being the son of one of Richard's business rivals, which immediately set him up as a complicated figure in Lorelai's life. And again, to me, was a sign that they shouldn't have been in a relationship. Nothing should have happened, because that was pulling her back into the old world, and it's too incestuous and weird with the whole business and pleasure. Like, you should never mix business and pleasure. It was too complicated. And he pushed a lot to ask her out, and he took her to this terrible restaurant with this weird seating. It was like really isolated in the middle of nowhere, and like it was secluded, and she made it very clear that like she wasn't interested in being there at all. She was like, can we leave? And it was just such a bad date all in all. But you know, after that awkward business dinner, he pursued her, and to me, I just felt like Lorelai wanted to rebel. She was secretly looking to rebel. He was secretly looking to rebel, because she was the one that was really pushing to like keep it secret from her parents, because she didn't want them to know. She wanted to hide it in case she like got in trouble. And Jason's like, no, they need to know, because this is complicating things now. But maybe he just saw Lorelai as like the ultimate trophy. Like, he liked the idea of dating the daughter of his business rival, while Richard remained completely unaware, just to humiliate him or something. But this is the interesting thing, because Richard undercut Jason in business, which was a low move. And Jason responded by suing Richard, standing up for himself, right? And Lorelai is just enraged at him for this, and she goes to like cut him off and like break up with him. And you know, he's trying to convince himself he can get her back afterwards, because he's just like obsessed with her. And it put Lorelai sure in an impossible position. But like, you know, she was very quick to dump him over this without seeing that it was complicated for him. And Richard was also screwing him over, you know. But I think he felt like blindsided by this and hurt, but I really don't know what he was expecting when he came into a relationship where it was starting off with secrecy. They never work. The fact that he thought Lorelai might side with him over her father, shows that maybe he misunderstood her and her true family loyalties. Next we have Peyton and Alex. They're two of Lorelai's most forgettable and irrelevant love interests, but they are interesting. Peyton was a society date who Emily actually set Lorelai up with. He's described as handsome and eligible, which is Emily's words, not Lorelai's.
Yes? Well, yeah.
She says he's boring, so boring. And he probably is, and he's not her type, but I do wonder whether it was more so that he was boring because he was taking his time to get to know her and talk and ask things, and she just found it boring because her ego was bruised and he wasn't giving her like enough attention, and he wasn't just immediately like in love with her off the bat, because as she liked Max, like he was really boring and stale. So I don't understand why she has the nerve now to call this guy boring when he's probably just as boring as Max, who she got engaged to. But she wants personality and connection, and so Lorelai has to very bluntly tell Emily that the date was awful and she's never doing it again, and she has to like, you know, draw a boundary somewhere on her personal life. And Emily says, you spend 5 seconds with a person, and if they say one wrong thing, you turn on them and you never give them a chance. You're extremely judgmental, Lorelai. Okay, bitch. Okay. What I love about Emily is she focuses so much on what Lorelai's doing wrong and has absolutely zero introspection about her own parenting, which I like absolutely hate. And then, oh yeah, then she has like her date to this concert. I think that's with Peyton, and Emily's like infuriated that Lorelai would cancel her date to the concert with Peyton. Or was that with the other guy? I honestly don't know. There's two guys. There's Peyton and there's Alex, and they're both like similarly like completely irrelevant. No, I think Alex was just a bad date and she like disengaged and she wasn't interested. But I think Peyton, she was meant to go to a concert with afterwards, but she had such a bad time in the dinner date, she didn't want to go, and they were unsuited to each other. But Emily wants it to be this business thing, so she cares that Lorelai rejected her friend's son, which makes Emily look bad by association. So then Richard calls Lorelai to try and force her into going out with, is it Peyton? Yeah, into going out with Peyton again, even though she had an awful time. They're so fake, so controlling. And this shows to me that like Lorelai doesn't date casually very well. She's either all in or she's all out, and she needs a connection, or she's done. Like, she's not interested in like wasting her time. And I do wonder if from Peyton's perspective, he also felt forced into the date by his own mother, so he tried to act as boring as possible to ensure there would be no second date, because maybe he didn't want it either. Maybe he didn't really have the hots for Lorelai himself, you know what I mean? Oh wait, no, Alex, I wrote it here. Alex was a different guy, and he was only Lorelai's sort of date for a short time, but they had ambition, they also had banter, intellectual chemistry, and like very similar interests, and he was like a really nice guy. And when he realized how much Lorelai hated fishing, he course corrected so that their getaway wouldn't turn into like a total disaster. And I think if he'd stuck around longer, he would be higher on the list, but the only problem was we didn't get to see enough of him, so I can't really say. I think the actor had to leave the show, so it was cut quite short. I know, I think he had to look after his daughter or something, so yeah, he just sort of left, and they just say that a distance grew between them and they didn't really see each other again. And also, I'm pretty sure that she kissed Max when she was with Alex. That tells me that she doesn't really care that much about Alex, but that's the interesting thing, is how Lorelai can really struggle to like stay loyal in her relationships, and that does give guys a lot of trust issues that she's with and insecurities. Like, Luke is always insecure because of her thing with Christopher and her having Christopher in her life, and Christopher's insecure when Lorelai has Luke in her life and can't cut him out of her life. So I do think that she kind of wants to have her cake and eat it too sometimes. It's something that makes her partners insecure, also because Lorelai struggles to compromise. So the problem is a lot of her dates, especially Luke, give her everything that she wants without compromising. I think this can be a problem because then she just literally is never told no. I want to know, like, if you want to see this type of video for Rory next, but I'm just gonna now hand it over to you guys and read what you guys said on my community post, because I'm genuinely like so curious. Jack said, I may be in the minority, but I didn't really care that Lorelai slept with Christopher after breaking up with Luke. It was not a good decision, but she and Luke were done, and she thought there was no hope of them getting back together, and her getting with Christopher had to happen at some point so they could stop wondering what it would be like to be together. I like definitely agree somewhat, but I also think that Christopher needed to make a move on Lorelai when she was like in a normal headspace and not just jump in when she was upset about something, because I think that happened too often, and that was definitely like not the time for it, because if he really cared about like her happiness, I think he would have tried to take it a bit more slow with her, in my opinion. Lindsay said, I think dating Lorelai would be like secretly taking care of her. She likes to be independent, but she's scatterbrained, so it's casually slipping in with those fixes. You know she's going to forget her keys that she's supposed to bring, so you slip them in her purse as you hug her goodbye. And also, like, you need to believe in her big dreams. Like, yes, she might need to be grounded, but you need to absolutely love every single quirk that makes her her. And I agree. I think that's why like it worked so well with her and Luke, is because Lorelai has a lot of responsibilities and she can be forgetful sometimes, and it definitely is nice when she has a partner that, rather than resenting her for it, enjoys doting on her a bit and just helping her with things, and also someone that has a very high tolerance for her levels of energy and her ability to talk so much, you know. So someone more soft-spoken like Luke could definitely work, you know. Go Jess said she can be self-centered and flighty. The way she treated Max Medina was honestly crazy. If it had been him chasing her around that classroom, people would have given his character so much shit, but she does it and it's not that bad. Plus she knew that her dad had screwed Jason over horribly, yet she left him in a blink of an eye when he decided to take legal action, rightfully so. I agree with this, and if you guys are confused by what she means by the classroom scene, this is a reference to after she'd broken up with Max, or they weren't going to see each other anymore. She arrives at his classroom to talk to him after they agreed they wouldn't see each other anymore, and he's just begging her to like stay away from him because it's just painful like being near her and seeing her face, and she's like, what do you mean, like come back? And she's like coming further towards him, and yeah, low-key chasing him around the classroom. It's kind of uncomfortable to watch, especially if the genders were reversed. So yeah, she definitely like had her own issues too with not getting what she wanted. Brenda said, humbling to date her. I think she's fun, cute, and welcoming, but doesn't always fully let them in. She grew up feeling misunderstood and dismissed from the two people that should have made her feel safe and accepted. She managed to get away from that, stand on her own, and build the life and family she always wanted. She already had her happily ever after, and she gave it to herself. Any guy that comes in to do that and compete is competing for second place. I agree, and that's why she ultimately chose Luke, is because she was so touched by how much he didn't overstep and he factored in Rory and did things for her and Rory, because she's already like created a perfect life, so she needs someone to like fit into that, you know. Zoe said, as much as I love Lorelai, she has an avoidant attachment style, probably because of her childhood trauma with her parents, and that makes her a poor choice of partner. We see it time and time again in the show, or see people like Suki and her mum Emily say that she'll meet someone great like Max and push them away and not even give them a chance, like she was with Luke for years. Great person, but not someone I'd want to date. I kind of agree in a sense, because she really keeps people at a distance and it takes quite a long time to get her to really lower down her walls, you know what I mean? And it makes sense. Bree said, I love Lorelai, but she would be a hard person to date because she does not do well with compromising and not having her way all the time. And I kind of agree, to be honest. I think it's because she's so hyper independent. She's so used to doing things on her own. She raised a whole child by herself and she did it in the way that worked for her. So she just isn't used to co-collaborating with someone. And James said, honestly, as someone who values peace, I would not be able to date her. I have way too many hang-ups with my own family to deal with. And I think that's why Luke works with her. He's a stabilizing force in her life, and he was able to help her stand up for herself against her mum, and he cared about Rory. For me, this is a really big differentiator, is because there were a few times where Luke extremely bravely stood up to Emily and basically told her to back off, or even if he didn't verbally like say it, he just supported Lorelai through that process, which is really what she needed. The Liberated Worker said, as a man, I think dating Lorelai would have been a different experience depending on when you were with her, as she changes drastically throughout the series. Dating her pre-series would have been incredibly frustrating, as we know she was never with anyone for as long as 3 months until Max. She was very selfish in her relationship with Max. It was all based on her needs and her timing, with the exception of his initial proposal, which she also takes immediate control of. She does things like keeping their relationship a secret and not giving him keys when he's supposed to be moving in. Dating her as Christopher was a roller coaster and confusing. She constantly sends him mixed signals and can never stand by her decision on him for long, although he's also bad at this. Dating her as Alex was fun but confusing. She spends time with him, they seem to have fun, they go away together with her friends, and then she just drops him with no word that we know of. Dating her as Jason was work. Her refusal to tell her parents would make his life a constant struggle. She sees her parents once a week for dinner and calls them once a week. It's very little work for her to maintain the lie. For him, he works with Richard, long hours in an office with him, just him and their 2 secretaries. Think about never being able to even mention your personal life to your business partner because you're secretly dating their daughter and they won't let you say anything. Constant stress. Yikes. Dating her as Luke. On one hand, his dream girl. On the other hand, his dream girl. How is she supposed to live up to like a decade of building up he's been doing? How is he supposed to remove the tinted glasses and see who she really is in order to have a proper relationship? I think most of their problems are caused by him putting her on a pedestal, and she isn't very good at relationships, so they're in a cycle of being hurt by each other's own normal human behaviors. Overall, she's someone who's fun and exciting, but it'll be a lot of effort to maintain a serious relationship with her. I totally agree, and as a fan of this show and as a huge fan of Lorelai, like, I'm 100% on board with this take, especially in reference to Luke's idealization of Lorelai, because that's the thing, being someone's friend for years or admiring them from a distance and fantasizing about them is very, very different to actually dating them for real. Danielle said it won't be a very equal partnership when it comes to division of labor in your home, and she won't apologize very much when she's in the wrong, but definitely wants one from you when you're wrong. That's kind of true, because I'm pretty sure when she went off with Christopher after breaking up with Luke, I don't think she really properly apologized to Luke for that. Or if she did, it took her way too long to do so. So I kind of agree with that. So let me know like what you guys think of this video. I'm incredibly curious. And again, a huge thank you to June's Journey for sponsoring me on today's video. Don't forget to check it out. It's free and the link's in the description. Stay tuned for the rest of the series and I'll see you guys for the next one. Bye guys.